Hello, everyone. Tonight we're stepping into a world where power moves in silence, where laws are unwritten as often as they are carved into stone, and where your ability to survive the day depends not just on strength, but on navigating a culture as intricate and unforgiving as its palaces. Imagine waking up before the sun in the heart of Constantinople during the height of the Ottoman Empire. The air is thick with the smell of charcoal and spiced oil. A distant call, the muezzin's voice rises like mist over tiled rooftops, echoing across courtyards and up toward your wooden shutter. You're not in your own bed anymore. You're a guest here, or maybe just another body in the city's vast machinery. So, before you get too comfortable, take a quick moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And please, leave a comment with your location and local time down below. I always love seeing where in the world you're listening from tonight. Now, turn off the lights, maybe switch on a fan for some soft background noise, and let's step quietly together into tonight's journey. The cold stone floor stings your feet as you slide out from under a thin wool blanket. Your room is a square of brick and plaster, sparsely furnished. One narrow cot, a low table, a clay water jug, and a single candle stub melting into the base of a brass holder. Outside, the city is waking. You can already hear the soft creak of a merchant's cart and the faint thump of sandals against cobblestones. There's no private bathroom, no faucet, no morning coffee. Instead, you wrap yourself in a rough cotton cloak and step outside toward the communal fountain, where water from an ancient cistern trickles endlessly into a stone basin. Others are already there, a bearded man splashing his face with practice. Haste, a woman drawing water into a copper pot with arms strong from years of repetition. No one greets you. They barely glance your way. You're already an outsider. When you lean forward to splash your own face, the cold hits harder than you expect. It stings your skin and runs down your neck, soaking the thin cloth. You glance around and realize you're being too slow. These people know something you don't. Time is rationed here, not just minutes, but motion, space, and social grace. Breakfast, if you're lucky, is a crust of bread and a few olives, maybe a slice of hard cheese wrapped in linen. But it isn't about the food, it's about the ritual. You sit on a low stool among others in the courtyard. No one talks. Each bite is purposeful. Someone sneezes and no one says anything. It's not rude. It's just efficient. You break your bread wrong too loudly, and someone raises an eyebrow. Just once, it's enough. Already, the city around you surges. A boy runs by, barefoot, clutching a scroll. He disappears into the crowd. A voice calls out names from a ledger. A man in robes haggles over sacks of saffron. And you realize, too late, that standing in the way is not just inconvenient, it's punishable. Guard jostles past you, his curved sword knocking lightly against your elbow. It isn't a threat. It's a reminder. Keep moving. Somewhere deep in the labyrinth of alleyways, smoke curls from a domed bathhouse. You catch a glimpse of steam rising past an open grate and realize that even relaxation here is orchestrated, timed, taxed, and tiered according to your status. You wouldn't even be allowed in without the right token, the right introduction, the right reason. And you have none of those. You wander further, toward a narrow street paved in uneven stone, where shadows cling to shuttered windows and whispers seem to move ahead of you. A boy sells dates from a woven basket. A stray dog with patchy fur follows you for a while, then vanishes into an alley. The city is alive, but not for you. Not yet. By mid-morning, the sun begins to sharpen. The light glances off polished tiles and gilded domes, making you squint despite the haze. You reach a small plaza where a group of men kneel for prayer. There, movements are graceful, synchronized. You pause at the edge, unsure of where to stand. Afraid of being seen, more afraid of being ignored. That you are not hungry, not yet. But you are tired. A kind of tired that comes from being watched, judged, misplaced. You sit on a low wall near a fig tree. Its branches heavy with green fruit, not yet ripe. A boy climbs it effortlessly, barefoot, as if the bark bends just for him. He doesn't notice you. And that, somehow, is the worst part. The Ottoman Empire does not wait for you to adjust. It doesn't offer orientation. It expects you to know when to speak, when to bow, when to disappear. And as you sit in the courtyard, already aching, from the strain of trying to belong, you understand something unspoken. This empire may be built on law, but it breathes through ritual, hierarchy, and silence, and you're already falling behind. By the time the sky begins to brighten into a pale, unforgiving blue, you're already being pulled along by the rhythm of a city that never really rests. You're directed wordlessly, with a pointed glance toward a public bathhouse, one of the many hammams that serve both the noble and the anonymous. It's not a request. You need to be clean, not just for health, but for decency, for faith, for visibility. Cleanliness here is more than hygiene. It's honor. And right now, you're still coated in yesterday. The hammam entrance is carved stone, curved and domed, crowned with iron latticework where morning light filters in as thin gold lines. You pay with a borrowed coin. It's not enough for luxury, no scented oils, no masseur, but just enough for entry. A silent attendant hands you a folded pestle and a pair of wooden sandals. His eyes don't meet yours. That, apparently, would be too familiar. Inside, the air is thick and wet, immediately clinging to your skin. Steam curls through arched chambers, and you follow the echoes of dripping water into a round room glowing with diffuse sunlight. Naked bodies move without shame, lean, wiry men with calloused feet and backs, traced by the marks of work, of age, of survival. You try not to look. You try not to seem too stiff, too soft, too clean in the wrong ways. You sit by the basin and pour water over yourself from a copper bowl. It splashes noisily, breaking the trance-like quiet. No one comments, but a man beside you glances once, then adjusts his position, turning slightly away. You mimic his motion, awkwardly, trying to disappear into etiquette. It's a dance you were never taught. The stone beneath you is hot pleasant at first, then relentless. You lie down, trying to follow the customs. Silence, stillness, acceptance. But the heat presses into your spine, into your jaw, your bones. Your heart thumps with each drop of sweat, rolling past your temples. A boy scrubs the floor near the doorway, singing under his breath in a minor key you can't quite place. It's beautiful. It's haunting. It feels centuries old. Eventually, you're given a small cloth and expected to dry off in the outer room. There's no towel, no robe, no soap, unless you brought your own. You didn't. The cloth is scratchy, barely enough to wrap around your waist. Your hair drips into your eyes. No one helps. No one offers advice, because everyone assumes you know. Outside, the sudden brightness stings. The wind feels sharp against your damp skin. You shiver despite the heat. Already, the bath has become memory quickly replaced by the new demand of appearances. Because now comes your first real test. Breakfast with the master of the household, where you've been allowed to stay. The man is seated beneath a canopy of vines, surrounded by small dishes. Olives, goat cheese, honey, thick bread, black tea. His clothes are simple but rich layers of dark linen, with silver embroidery at the cuffs. You bow too deeply, then not deeply enough. You sit when you should have waited. Someone clears their throat. A quiet correction, sharp as any blade. Reach for the bread too early, then retreat your hand as if burned. No one says a word, but your mistake floats in the air like the scent of cardamom strong, lingering, hard to miss. You try again, slower this time, following others' movements. You dip, tear, chew in silence. The honey is dark, smoky. The olives are wrinkled, salty. The tea tastes of metal and overboiled leaves. You want to ask for water. You don't. Across the table, conversation flows soft and rhythmic, as if rehearsed. No one raises their voice. Every gesture carries weight. A man speaks of a caravan delayed by floods. Another mentions rumors from the Janissary barracks. You understand fragments, names, dates, tension. The words are not for you. But your presence is noted, weighed, recorded. A boy enters carrying a clay tablet and stylus. He kneels by the elder and begins transcribing something spoken in a hushed tone. You wonder if it's a letter, a list, a poem. The boy's hand doesn't tremble. Yours would. The courtyard begins to fill with light. Birds chatter above, and a cat pads between cushions. You shift your legs beneath you, feeling the early ache from the bath, from posture, from holding yourself too carefully. You are not used to being this visible, or this quiet. The master turns to you once and asks your name. You answer too quickly. He nods. It's not approval. It's acknowledgement. And yet, your breath catches as if you've been forgiven for something you didn't realize you'd done. When the meal ends, everyone rises without a signal. You follow, a beat too late. A servant hands you your shoes' wooden soles, leather straps stiff from use. You bow. The servant does not respond. That, too, is part of the lesson. By mid-morning, you've learned more than you expected, not about food or custom, but about the weight of being foreign in a world that reads fluency in silence, not speech. You are not punished, but you are not welcomed. You exist here in parentheses. And the city hasn't even started moving at full pace. Your feet ache already, but there's no time to rest. You're led through a series of narrow streets where every shadow feels deliberate and every turn is sharper than the last. The scent of spices, cinnamon, clove, cumin rises from the market stalls and sticks to your skin like perfume. Voices ring out in Turkish, Arabic, Greek, Armenian, all tangled in the air like the woven rugs displayed in windows. You're headed to the Grand Bazaar, the empire's breathing heart, though it doesn't beat for you. The entrance looms like the open mouth of a beast, stone arches carved with floral script, guards posted casually with curved sabers gleaming. Under the sun, you pass beneath them with a borrowed purpose, trying to act as if you belong. Inside, the bazaar swallows you whole. It's not the color or noise that overwhelms. It's the sheer density of attention. Eyes track you. Merchants call out, offering silk and sugar, glass and tin. A child tries to slip a trinket into your satchel. You catch him by the wrist, gently, only to see his mother glaring from across the aisle. You release him, and he vanishes like smoke. Your guide, a short man in a saffron robe with teeth, stained by chewing cloves, tells you you'll be observing, not speaking, not bartering, not buying, just watching. And so you do. You watch as men haggle over camel saddles, over bolts of velvet, over dried apricots and brass ewers etched with delicate patterns. You see a fishmonger slice open the belly of a carp and toss its guts into a bucket without pausing his conversation. You're shown how deals are made not with coin, but with eye contact, silence, and shared tea. A merchant pours strong black K into tulip-shaped glasses with an elegance that borders on performance. You're handed one. It's scalding, bitter, and delicious. You nod politely. He does not nod back. A commotion erupts down the aisle. A man has accused another of short-weighing pistachios. Voices rise. Hands gesture wildly. For a moment, it looks like violence will follow. But then a third man intervenes older, with a red sash that marks him as a mediator. He calms the scene with a few words and a long pause. The crowd dissipates. The rhythm resumes. Your guide says nothing, but the lesson is obvious. This place is not just commerce, it's diplomacy, ritual, chess played with apricots and vinegar. Every step, every blink, every silence matters. You duck into a smaller stall filled with inks and parchment. The scent is old dust and dye, and something metallic. The shopkeeper shows you a book bound in leather, its spine hand-stitched, its pages filled with Ottoman script and tiny gold flourishes. You can't read it, but you can feel its age, its weight. The man lifts the brush, dips it, and writes your name in fluid, unreadable lines. You bow slightly. He smiles, but doesn't speak. Somewhere outside, a muezzin begins the call to prayer. Again, the sound wraps around the walls of the bazaar like a ribbon haunting and hollow. People begin to drift toward the exits. Others kneel where they stand. You step back, unsure. There is no time to ask questions. The guide leads you out through a different gate, one that opens onto a quieter courtyard where a fountain bubbles and pigeons bob their heads between stones. You sit. The stone is warm beneath you. Your head aches from the sheer input sent, sound, motion, translation. You try to replay what you've seen, but it all tangles together in color and glare. A beggar approaches, his robe torn, one eye clouded with white. He does not speak. He simply holds out a hand. You have nothing to give. You shake your head, and he nods, as if that was the answer he expected. The guide looks at you for the first time in hours and says, "Now you've seen the belly of it." He doesn't explain what it is. You think maybe he means the empire, or maybe he means survival. He tells you your next task is to carry a package across the city to the port. He hands you a cloth-wrapped bundle, tied with leather cord. It's not heavy, but he says not to open it. You nod. You begin walking again. Through courtyards, past mosques, under archways, so intricately carved they seem to whisper. The bundle thumps against your side with every step. You pass guards, vendors, children chasing chickens, and old men tossing dice in the shade of a fig tree. You are invisible, and yet you are watched. You cross a bridge over the Golden Horn, and for a moment you pause. The water below glistens. With oil and sunlight, boats rocking gently against the docks. A seagull screams. The sky is too blue. The kind of blue that makes you homesick for somewhere you've never been. When you reach the port, a man in a green sash takes the bundle without a word. He disappears into the hull of a ship so quickly, you wonder if you dreamed the entire task. You wait for a receipt, a nod, anything, but there's nothing. You turn to walk back. And as you do, you realize something strange. Your feet no longer ache, not because the roads have softened, but because your body has adjusted. Because it had to. And still, the day isn't done. By the time you return to the heart of the city, your legs feel heavier, not with pain, but with the weight of repetition, one foot in front of the other, over stones, polished by centuries of footsteps. You've been sent to a nearby madrasa. Next, not to study, of course, but to observe. A visiting guest, the guide said, though you know that what he really meant was outsider. Curiosity wrapped in politeness. You are expected to stay silent, to keep your eyes open and your mouth closed. The madrasa is a quiet complex, all graceful arches and shaded colonnades, built around a central garden where roses bloom despite the heat. Students move about with scrolls tucked beneath their arms, robes cinched neatly at the waist. Their sandals slap gently against marble floors as they walk in practiced rhythm. You sit on a low bench at the edge of the courtyard, the sun filtered through lattice screens. casting geometric shadows at your feet. Inside a narrow study hall, young men recite verses from memory. Their voices rise in unison, melodic and sure, each syllable landing like a chisel against stone. You recognize none of the words, but the cadence lulls you, so measured, so intentional. A teacher, older and robed in deep indigo, interrupts, occasionally correcting a tone or gesture with a single raised eyebrow or a soft cluck of the tone. It's gentle but precise. A student stumbles over a passage. Silence falls. The boy frowns, corrects himself, and begins again. You feel his shame as if it were your own. Not because he was ridiculed, but because here, precision is prayer. Knowledge is sacred. Getting it wrong isn't just a mistake. It's a fracture in the order of things not outside. A group sits cross-legged on woven mats, discussing astronomy. You catch glimpses phrases like a movement of Venus, lunar cycles, divine harmony. They draw with charcoal on slate, tracing arcs and symbols you can't decipher. One of them catches your eye and offers a small smile. You nod back. The moment vanishes. A servant brings a tray of sour yogurt, flatbread, and figs to the teachers. You're offered none. You weren't expected to stay this long. But still, you sit, not because you're welcome, but because you found something. Hear a rhythm, a quiet rigor, a devotion that humbles you. Later, you're allowed to enter the small library, a treasure hidden behind wooden doors carved with verses. The room smells of ink, dust, and parchment. Shelves bend under the weight of handwritten texts, some rolled, others bound in leather or fabric. A librarian gestures toward a low table and places a manuscript in front of you. You aren't allowed to touch it. Just look. The script curls like smoke across the page, Ottoman Turkish in calligraphy, so fine it seems drawn by breath, not hand. Illuminated edges glitter faintly with shell gold. There are diagrams in the margins, maps of stars, herbal cures, measurements of temple stones. You don't understand them, but you feel their purpose humming from the vellum itself. A student enters with an armful of scrolls and nearly drops them. You lurch forward to help, but are stopped by the librarian's glance. No touching, no helping. You lean back. The scrolls are gathered again, the moment repaired as if it never happened. By late afternoon, the air has shifted. It's still warm, but the sun's light feels softer now, slanting in at angles that turn every corner into shadow. The call to prayer rises again, and the students rise with it. You follow them to the mosque beside the madrasa, not to join, but to witness. Interior is vast. Blue tiles shimmer under candlelight. Incense curls from brass lanterns. The carpet underfoot cushions your steps. You stand at the back, near a column, head bowed. The rows form quickly, bodies aligning with practiced ease. When they move as one, bowing, kneeling, rising in silence. You watch, still, not daring to shift your weight. And then, in that hush between recitations, something inside you slows. You forget the ache in your back, the sting of salt in your eyes, the taste of hunger pressing against your tongue. For a moment, you are nothing but breath in a room full of ancient light. As the prayer ends, no one looks at you. No one speaks. They simply return to their day. You leave with them, but not as one of them. You exit through the courtyard, past the roses now closing for the night. You walk back alone, every step echoing louder than the last, as if the stones themselves are taking notice. A boy races past, kicking up dust. A dog barks somewhere in the alley. A woman leans out of a window and pours water into the gutter below. Life here never stops. It folds, it repeats, it remembers. And as you round the corner back toward your host's home, you realize you've learned more than facts. Today, you've learned restraint and reverence and how heavy the air can feel when no one's watching yet everything sees. You wake the next morning with muscles that feel like soaked rope, twisted, heavy, and slow to respond. The mat beneath you has hardened overnight, or maybe your body has simply lost its softness. The air smells of warm bread and ash. Outside, your window, a rooster crows, but its call blends into the city's deeper hum. Vendors setting up carts, iron gates scraping open, a distant clang of copper on stone. The empire stirs again, and you are not exempt from its pace. Today's duty is different. You are to accompany a local physician, more scholar than doctor, your guide says on his rounds. He is a thin man with silver threaded through his beard and a walking stick that clicks with authority. He wears a robe the color of clay, its sleeves stained faintly with what you hope is only ink. He does not speak to you at first, only nods, and begins to walk. You follow him through alleyways, damp with the scent of refuse and jasmine. Cats blink lazily from windowsills. You pass a baker brushing sesame over rings of dough, and a potter turning clay silently with hands that seem made of river mud. No one stops you, but they watch. The physician's first stop is a widow's home. The woman is old, her eyes milky, her breath rattling like wind through reeds. She lies on a cot beside a brazier, incense burning to keep flies away. Her daughter kneels nearby, grinding herbs into a powder that smells of mint and vinegar. The physician does not rush. He places 2 fingers on the old woman's wrist, counts under his breath, and murmurs a prayer. You are asked to boil water. It takes longer than you expect. The coals are stubborn, and your hands tremble as you pour. The daughter hands you a bundle of cloth soaked in something bitter. She says a word you don't understand. You nod anyway. Later, walking again, the physician explains something about humors and balance, about wind and bile and phlegm. You don't follow, not really, but his conviction is steady, like a tide. He believes, and so his patients believe. That in this place might be enough. You visit a spice merchant with a swollen foot, a boy feverish and mumbling, and a pregnant woman who clutches her belly as if holding in a storm. The physician gives them advice, sometimes tinctures, sometimes just words. He speaks with equal weight in all cases, not because he knows all, but because they need him to sound like he does. By midday, the sun hangs overhead like a blade. You pause beneath an awning to share figs and water. The physician finally looks at you. You think medicine is certainty, he says, but here it's an agreement between what we know and what we need to believe. You chew your fig and nod, not because you understand, but because he's watching. After the meal, you're taken to the poor district, the part of the city built not in stone, but in patched wood and cloth and hope. The streets are narrower here, the smell stronger. Children run barefoot through puddles. A girl clutches a doll made of straw and linen. Scraps, she waves at you. You wave back. The physician does not stop walking. Inside a low hut, a man lies curled beneath a rug, coughing blood into a clay bowl. His wife begs in a language you don't recognize. The physician's face remains calm, but you see it in his hands. He knows. There's little to be done. Still, he unwraps his satchel and begins. He prepares a tonic with bark and honey, whispers something against the man's ear, and places a small talisman beneath the cot. You want to ask what it means, but you don't. Not here. When you leave, the woman follows you outside, pressing a crust of bread into your palm. A thank you, though you've done nothing. You bow, unsure what else to offer. Walking back, the physician finally sighs. We heal what we can, he says. The rest we witness. That evening, as you rinse the city from your skin in a basin of cold water, you find yourself thinking about those words. How much of history, of empire, is not about conquest or glory, but about witnessing, about being present for the fragile, the fading, the forgotten. You lie back on your mat, arms behind your head. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, a baby cries. A lute plays a mournful tune through a shuttered window. Life continues, not dramatically, but insistently. And as your eyes drift shut, you carry with you the quiet weight of the day, not as a burden, but as something else entirely, something tender, something real. The following morning greets you with stillness, a rare pause in the otherwise ceaseless rhythm of Ottoman life. The sky is a soft gray veil, diffusing the sunlight into a pale shimmer. Even the roosters seem reluctant to crow. But your guide, ever punctual, taps at your door with news. Today, you'll shadow an artisan in the imperial tile workshops. You're told it's an honor few outsiders are permitted within the heart of this industry, the very soul of Ottoman ornamentation. You follow him through winding alleys to a low, domed building tucked behind a public bathhouse. The tile workshop is alive with quiet activity men bent over long wooden tables, brushes in hand, painting delicate floral patterns onto square panels of white. The smell of glaze and clay hangs heavy in the air, tinged with something sharp perhaps, vinegar or iron. Your assigned host is a man named Salim. He wears a wrap around his head and smocks stained with every shade of blue. He greets you with a nod, says nothing, and gestures for you to sit. He is not rude, only focused. You sense that conversation is secondary here, that the real language is line and color.sel. IM places a tile in front of you, a fresh piece, still soft to the touch. He dips his brush into a pot of cobalt and begins to paint, his wrist moving with fluid grace. Vine patterns emerge like incantations, curling into tulips and saz leaves. You try to follow with your eyes, but his speed is deceptive. Each stroke seems spontaneous yet calculated. You're offered a turn. The brush feels alien in your hand, too light, too slippery. Your first stroke wobbles, your second bleeds too wide. Salim watches without judgment, but does not mask his amusement. He takes the tile back and begins again, effortlessly hiding your errors beneath new lines. The tile is both canvas and forgiver. Behind you, the kilns roar quietly. A worker opens, the heavy door with iron tongs, revealing rows of glowing ceramic. The heat pulses like a heartbeat, pushing against your face. You're told that the tiles must be fired twice once to set the base, again to lock in the glaze. The process is ancient, refined, almost alchemical. You wonder how many artisans learned it by doing, by burning their hands, by cracking their first 1,000 tiles before making a single flawless one. Later, you are asked to help mix the glaze. It's a process both physical and delicate, crushed quartz and lead oxide ground together, water added in precise amounts. The slurry glistens like pearl. You pour it over a finished tile, watching as it pools into every groove, transforming dull clay into something luminous. It will dry cloudy, Salim says, but after the fire, it becomes sky. He shows you a storage room filled with completed work styles stacked in crates like slices of captured heaven. Some are destined for mosques, others for palaces, and a few for fountains hidden deep in gardens you'll never see. Each tile is a fragment, but together they form stories. Wall-sized mosaics of geometry and grace. One piece catches your eye. A deep blue panel with gold filigree, depicting a cypress tree rising through swirling clouds. It feels almost alive, like wind trapped in ceramic. That one, Salim says quietly, was made during the famine. He doesn't explain further. He doesn't need to. The afternoon stretches on. Your shoulders ache, your hands are dusted in powdered minerals, and your throat is parched. A boy brings a tray of tea-strong, bitter, scalding. You sip gratefully. Across the workshop, someone begins humming, and like in the fields days before, others join in. A low, wordless tune, more rhythm than melody. You find yourself nodding to its pulse.sel. I'm hands you a tile. Yours, he says. It is uneven. A corner is chipped. The paint has run slightly. But he's right. It is yours. A flawed fragment of a day spent in quiet labor. You bow your head in thanks, unsure of the words to match the moment dot as you leave the workshop. The city has shifted. Again, the wind has picked up, stirring the dust into spirals that dance down narrow streets. A woman laughs loudly from a balcony above. A peddler calls out the price of cucumbers. The empire keeps moving. Back at your quarters, you place the tile beside. Your mat. It is imperfect, and yet you find it beautiful. It holds not just color and clay, but time and sweat and the sound of shared silence. A memory you can touch. And as you drift into sleep that night, it is not the splendor of mosques or the might of armies you remember. It is the slow grace of a hand holding a brush and the fire that waits to turn powder into permanence. The morning air feels thick with anticipation, like something is about to happen, though no one will say exactly what. You're told today is a day of justice, not in the metaphorical sense, but a literal gathering at the imperial court where disputes are aired, punishments rendered, and verdicts delivered before an audience. It is not a place for you, strictly speaking, but your host knows someone, and so, with borrowed robes and downcast eyes, you go. The courthouse is not grand. It is open air, shaded by stone columns, the floor swept clean, yet stained in places, with the grime of centuries. There are no gavels or wigs, no sweeping gestures of authority. Just a low platform, a scribe with ink-stained hands, and the quiet authority of a judge in a red turban seated on a woven cushion. Around him, a small crowd assembles, merchants, mothers, soldiers, all watching, all waiting you take your place. Among them, aware of every movement. A guard glances at you, lingers, then looks away. You're safe for now. The first case is simple. A dispute over stolen chickens. A young boy pleads innocence while an old man waves a broken coop door like a flag of righteousness. The judge listens in silence, then asks 3 questions in rapid succession. His tone is not loud, yet it carries, cutting through the murmurs. Like a blade, the boy's eyes drop. His shoulders fold inward. The judgment is swift. He must repay the birds or serve 2 weeks cleaning latrines. The old man nods. No one claps. No one cheers. More cases follow. A debt unsettled. A cart damaged. A missing necklace. Each is resolved with a balance of reason, precedent, and something else, intuition, perhaps, or performance. You realize the judge is not merely applying law. He is managing tension, containing it, releasing it in doses small enough to maintain. Order. Then comes the final case. A soldier accused of striking a shopkeeper during an argument. This is different. The crowd tightens. The shopkeeper's face is bruised, swollen. The soldier does not deny the act, but speaks of provocation, of honor, of disrespect. His voice trembles, not with fear, but fury barely contained. The judge leans forward. His expression changes. A flicker of something cold beneath his calm. The scribe records every word, his reed pen scratching like an insect. You glance at the faces around you. Some nod. Others shake their heads. A woman whispers a prayer. The judge speaks slowly now, his words like falling stones. The soldier's punishment is banishment for a season. Not death, not imprisonment, but distance, a message written in geography. You do not breathe until the platform empties. Later, outside, you ask your guide why the court felt more tense than even the battlefield reenactments or the physician's rounds. He smiles sadly. Because here no one bleeds, he says, but everyone bruises. You don't fully understand, but you feel the truth of it settle into your chest, like a weight dot as the sun reaches its peak. You pass through the city's market on your return. Everything seems louder now, fruit sellers haggling, donkeys braying, metal clanging. You buy a piece of flatbread from a silent boy who doesn't meet your eyes. It's warm, soft, a little salty. You eat it slowly, standing in the shadow of a pillar, trying to reassemble your thoughts. Back in your quarters, you wash your hands and change into dry clothes. The tile from the workshop still rests beside your mat, catching the afternoon light. You pick it up, feel the coolness beneath your fingertips, and remember how it was made carefully, deliberately, through fire. You think of the boy and the chickens, of the soldier's face as the sentence was spoken, and of the judge's silence. Between words, you wonder how often justice feels like peace, or if, more often, it feels like survival. That night, you lie awake longer than usual, the court's cadence echoing in your ears. You imagine yourself beneath that colonnade, not as a spectator, but as someone whose fate balanced on a stranger's word. You feel the weight of it, the fragility, the sharp edge of order held together by nothing more than words and eyes, and the threat of consequence. Eventually, sleep finds you, but not before you whisper a silent prayer, not to the judge, not even to the empire, but to the invisible thread that holds people together, despite all their flaws. The fragile, fierce hope that tomorrow, justice will still mean something. Your next morning begins not with sound, but scent. A strange aroma clove, sweat, burnt sugar hangs in the air before your eyes even open. When they do, you're already late. Today, you're to observe the spice merchants, not the wealthy, dealers who trade in bulk behind carved doors, but the small-scale traders who carry empires in pouches tied at their belts. Your guide greets you with a thin smile and hands you a small cloth to cover your mouth and nose. Too strong for foreigners, he says with a wink, and you believe him. Even in the open street, the scents strike in waves. Cardamom, cinnamon, pepper, dried rose, something pungent you can't name. It's both delightful and overwhelming. Like drowning in perfume, the market has changed. You notice new stalls, different faces. A woman crushes saffron threads with a stone mortar, staining her fingers gold. A boy fans smoke through a stack of drying clothes. Another vendor bites into a dried chili and laughs when a customer flinches. It is not just a place of commerce, it is performance. You're invited to sit beside a man with a neatly wrapped turban and eyes like polished walnut. He introduces himself as Murrah, a third-generation spice broker. Before speaking further, he opens a pouch and offers you a single piece of candied ginger. You chew. It's sweet at first, then sharply spicy, burning the back of your throat in a way that makes your eyes water and your mind sharpen. Mur8 tells you about trade. Roots how pepper comes by camel through desert passes, how nutmeg must cross oceans guarded by pirates in storms. He names cities you've never seen, kingdoms you've only heard of in bedtime stories. Every grain, he says, has bled for its journey. He lets you measure spices, sort them by color, texture, scent. You fail more than once confusing cumin with caraway, mistaking dried hibiscus for beetroot flakes. But he never mocks you. He only tells a story for each mistake. Of a man who once bought powdered lead thinking it was turmeric. Of a sultan's cook who mistook soap for salt. By midday, your head is spinning. The sensory overload is exhausting. Everything tastes like something else. Your fingers are stained red, yellow, brown. A splatter of something oily clings to your sleeve. Murrah shows you how to prepare a basic spice blend: coriander, sumac, garlic, salt. You grind it slowly with a stone, and the scent that rises is sharp and earthy. It smells like history. As the sun tilts westward, a commotion breaks out near the edge of the market. Two vendors argue in rapid-fire Turkish over what appears to be a batch of spoiled saffron. The crowd leans in, but does not intervene. It's a kind of ritual. You gather, letting conflict simmer just to the edge of boiling. Then, like a flame being pinched out, it ends. One man throws up his hands. The other spits on the ground. The day moves on. You feel your stomach twist, not from fear, but hunger. Murat offers a tiny parcel wrapped in fig leaves. Inside, rice, herbs, a sprinkle of pine nuts, and a sauce so fragrant you nearly cry. You eat silently, sitting on a crate of cinnamon bark, surrounded by piles of fragrant dust and drying stems. Later, back in your quarters, your clothes carry the scent of the market. No amount of rinsing in the basin can erase it. You lie down, your head still thick with the memory of scents that blurred the line between pleasure and pain. Before you drift off, you consider the strange power of spice, how something so small can spark wars, cross oceans, change the fate of cities. How something invisible on the tongue can linger longer than a sword wound. And how, in a world of muscle and monument, the strongest thing you encountered all day was a whisper of crushed clove in the breeze. Your morning begins with the slow clanging of distant bells, their dull tones spreading across the rooftops like fog. A messenger arrives just after sunrise with a brief message written on waxed paper. Today, you are to shadow the bathkeeper at the neighborhood hammam. You nod, unsure whether to be excited or alarmed. You visited modern spas before, yes, but nothing has prepared you for what the bathhouse will demand of your senses, your modesty or your skin. The hammam is a stone building tucked between a bakery and a fountain square, its domed roof barely visible through hanging linens and fruit carts. Inside, the light is dim and golden, filtered through small star-shaped holes in the ceiling. Steam curls up from unseen vents, clinging to your arms before you even fully step in. The warmth wraps you like a thick shawl. A part of you wants to lie down and melt. But you're here to work, not to soak. Your guide for the day is an older man named Hazen, built like a retired wrestler with arms like tree trunks and a voice that rumbles through your chest. He greets you with a raised eyebrow and hands you a folded cloth wrap. You quickly realize there will be no hiding behind layers here. Once changed, you step into the warm chamber barefoot, your soles immediately pressing into wet, slippery stone. Hazen walks you through the sequence of the bath ritual, starting with the warm room where guests sit in silence, letting the heat loosen their limbs and worries. Then comes the hot room, nearly unbearable at first, but you're expected to stay. You'll feel like a dumpling, he says, and it's not far from the truth. Sweat pours from your skin, and your breath feels like it's being borrowed from someone else. He teaches you how to ladle warm water from marble basins and pour it rhythmically over guests' backs. How to scrub them with coarse mitts made from raw silk. Not gently, he reminds you, as you wince your way through your first attempt. You're not tickling a cat, you're shedding skin. And indeed, skin comes off in gray ribbons, curling like tree bark under your fingers. Your hands ache from the constant scrubbing. Your clothes are soaked. Steam blinds you, and you nearly slip more than once. But Hazen laughs deep, echoing merciless. If you fall, don't scream. That's for the guests. He shows you the cold pool, too, reserved for the truly brave. Or foolish. One man dives in with a yelp. Another just wades, teeth chattering. You dip your toes and immediately regret it. Your job is to serve rosewater towels, to refill the coals, to keep the candles burning, and above all, to remain invisible. Around noon, the hammam quiets. Hazen gives you a flask of Aran-salted yogurt drink and a folded flatbread with olives. You eat behind a pillar, the hum of dripping water the only sound. For a moment, it feels like peace. In the afternoon, a nobleman arrives, escorted by 2 attendants. He carries himself like a leopard, poised, watchful, ready to pounce if displeased. You are warned not to make eye contact, not to speak unless addressed. You nod, barely breathing. His session is long. He requires scalding water, a double scrub, scented oil, and specific music played from the adjoining chamber. The attendants whisper instructions you barely understand, and still, Hazen only watches. Later, when the nobleman leaves satisfied, Hazen finally speaks. He tips in gold, he says, then adds, "If no one faints, you didn't faint. But you came close. By sunset, your arms feel hollow, your lungs are steam, your skin rubbed raw. You've scrubbed strangers until your fingers blistered, poured water until your legs trembled. And yet, as you leave the hammam, something strange flickers inside you. Pride. You endured. You served. You didn't disappear. Back at your quarters. The scent of rose oil still clings to your wrists. You lie on your mat, skin fever warm, eyes fluttering shut. And for the first time since arriving, your sleep comes quickly heavy and clean, like stone resting on stone. You awaken before dawn to the sound of chanting low, rhythmic, echoing across the rooftops like breath from another world. Today, you've been summoned to the imperial kitchens, a place of fire and steel, of hierarchy sharper than the knives they wield. You dress quickly, your muscles sore from the bathhouse, your fingers still tingling from yesterday's scrubbing. This is not rest, it is rotation. The Empire never sleeps, and neither, it seems, do you. The kitchens lie in the heart of the palace complex, their domes invisible from the outside, but always smoking from within. You are greeted by a stern-faced steward with a roll of parchment and ink-stained fingers. He says your name once dryly and points toward a doorway crowded, with young boys already carrying baskets of onions, garlic, sacks of rice. One limps, another has burned hands. No one speaks. You are assigned to the preparation chamber. No fire, no glory. Just knives, boards, and endless repetition. Your task, peel almonds. It sounds simple. It is not. The skins cling like secrets. Your nails bend back with each rub, and your fingers soon turn to prunes. There are piles of them, buckets full, and they must be blanched, skinned, and sorted by noon. You don't ask why. You just work. The heat builds, even without flames nearby. Steam seeps from adjoining rooms. The scent of roasted meat, honeyed pastries, and spiced stew teases you constantly, but never reaches your mouth. The head cook passes by, inspecting everything. He wears robes of dark green and a ring shaped like a lion's head. You lower your eyes. You've already heard the warnings. The last boy who dropped a tray was dismissed. No one knows where he went. At mid-morning, someone collapses. A boy, maybe 12. He drops to his knees with a crash of copper bowls. For a moment, the room freezes. The head cook doesn't shout. He simply snaps his fingers, and 2 others carry. The boy away. The almonds remain. Your second task is bread. You join a circle of workers kneading enormous slabs of dough. You mimic their motions: push, fold, turn, slam, over and over. Your wrists burn. Your back creaks. The flour sticks to your sweat, and you soon look like a ghost covered in snow. One baker smirks at your form. Another adjusts your stance without speaking. They are not unkind, just efficient. There is no room here for praise. Around you, ovens glow like suns. You pass trays of sesame rounds, glistening baklava, and long loaves topped with cheese and black seed. You're told not to touch them. You aren't high enough in rank. In fact, you're not sure what your rank is at all. Lunchtime comes, but not for you. The Janissaries are fed first, then the officials, then the eunuchs, and only then, maybe, the workers. You're handed a bowl of thin lentil porridge and a crust of bread hard enough to chip teeth. You eat in silence beside a pile of spent firewood, the warmth of the hearths barely touching you here. Later, you are moved to the suite. Room so called because everything is dusted with sugar, but nothing is sweet about the pace. You help shape sugar paste flowers, press molded fruits into trays, and glaze rose petal syrup over tiny cakes you will never taste. The artisans here are artists, and they know it. One corrects your posture with a tap of a wooden spoon, her. Expression unreadable dot as evening creeps in. The kitchens do not slow. A sultan is hosting a banquet. You don't see him, of course. You aren't even allowed in the hallway, outside the great dining hall. But you feel his presence in the frenzy. Trays polished to mirrors, sauces whispered over like spells, dates, stuffed with crushed pistachio and wrapped in candied orange peel. Before you're dismissed, the steward gives you a single leftover fig. It's soaked in honey, stuffed with crushed nuts, and so rich you nearly cry. You eat it behind a barrel, knees trembling, heart full of some strange, aching awe. The empire does not feed you often, but when it does, it teaches you something. That night, you sleep like bread rising in the dark, slow, quiet, and full of fire. The next morning greets you not with light, but with silence thick, waiting, almost reverent. Today, you are summoned to the scribe's quarter, a quiet wing of the palace where words are currency, and ink stains carry the weight of empires. After the sweat and smoke of the kitchens, it feels like stepping into a library of whispers. You don't know if this will be easier, only that it will be different. The room is long and narrow, with latticed windows that let in soft shafts of golden light. Low wooden desks line the walls, each paired with a small cushion, an inkstone, and a roll of parchment, so fine it looks like stretched silk. You are not handed a quill, not yet. First, you are taught how to grind ink. It comes in hardened cakes, black, red, even gold, and must be pressed into the stone with drops of rosewater and endless patience. You kneel beside a boy no older than 13 who shows you, silently, how to swirl the stone until the mixture turns smooth and glossy. His hands move with the grace of someone who has done this hundreds of times. Yours tremble. The scent of ink and old paper clings to the air like incense. The master scribe arrives mid-morning. He wears a deep blue robe with geometric patterns stitched in silver thread. His beard is ink-dark and perfectly shaped. He does not look at you as he speaks, but his voice cuts like a blade. He instructs the room to copy a passage from a court record, something about taxes, something about harvests. You are handed your first brush. Your hand cramps before the second word is done. This is not just writing. It is choreography. The curves must flow like reeds in wind. The spacing must be exact, measured against a guide string stretched across the page. One mistake, and the parchment is ruined. You blot a letter halfway through your first line. Boy beside you gently removes your brush and starts over. Hours pass in a hush. The only sounds are the soft scratch of reed pens and the occasional sigh. Your knees ache. Your eyes blur. You don't speak. You aren't spoken to. But you begin to feel it. The rhythm of precision, the quiet discipline of making language. Beautiful dot by midday. A scholar enters an older man, his back stooped, his robes worn. He brings with him a scroll older than anyone in the room. Its edges frayed, its script barely legible. Translate this, he says, dropping it onto the master's desk. The Greek is uncooperative. You don't even breathe as the master scribe leans in. He traces the ancient letters, murmuring to himself. Some of this is myth, he says. Some is law. The rest? Folklore, perhaps. He doesn't explain further. He simply assigns passages to each desk. You are given one paragraph, something about a serpent in the mountains, and a tribute paid in grain. You don't know Greek, but neither, it seems, do half the scribes. You're told to transcribe, not translate, to copy the shape of the letters, preserve their shadows, like art, like reverence. You follow the strokes as best you can. The curves resist your hand, but your focus sharpens. Later, the scholar returns, inspects your work, and raises one thin brow. Not terrible, he says, which in this room may as well be a standing ovation. In the late afternoon, a new assignment arrives to illuminate a border with gold leaf. The process is arcane and delicate. First, a thin glue made from fish bones is brushed into the parchment's edge. Then, using a fine brush and a breath held too long, the gold is laid in tiny flakes, pressed with a wolf hair pad until it shines like a secret. You barely manage half a border before your hand seize up. One scribe shows you a finished page, its breathtaking vines curling like poetry, stars dotting the margins, tiny animals with too many legs frolicking in the corners. No mistake, he says, tapping it, because this goes to the archives. This will outlive us all. You leave the scriptorium at dusk, your spine bent like a comma, your fingers ink-stained and twitching. But for the first time since arriving in the Empire, you've left a mark, a real one, even if no one will know your name. Back in your chamber, you hold your hands up to the fading light. They tremble, yes, but they shimmer too. A little, just a little. You're awoken before the sky shifts from black to blue, roused not by servants or bells, but by a knocking unlike any you've heard, measured, deliberate, and without urgency. A eunuch stands at the door, robed in pearl gray, his expression unreadable. He says nothing, merely hands you a folded cloth and gestures for you to follow. This time, you aren't going to work in kitchens or gardens or libraries. Today, you are going to witness Justice. The palace courtyard is silent except for the sound of sandals against stone. You walk behind the eunuch through narrow halls, lit only by oil lamps, their glow trembling against the tiles. Finally, you arrive at a smaller court, open to the sky. A group has already gathered, men in robes of different ranks, guards with polished spears, and a figure seated cross-legged at the center, head bowed, wrists bound in linen cords. You are told to stand at the edge, to observe and say nothing. The court scribe reads aloud from a scroll something about stolen grain, improper tribute, and rumors of insult against the local governor. You try to follow, but the language is thick, legal, precise. The accused man remains silent. His eyes do not rise. The Qadi, the judge, listens without interruption. He wears simple robes, no gold or embroidery, just a turban of deep blue and a gaze that seems to see beyond skin. The trial is short. Witnesses speak in hushed tones. The accused responds only when asked. There is no outburst, no spectacle, only procedure, like clockwork without gears. You expect something harsh or screaming, punishment, pain. But the sentence, when it comes, is exile. The man will be marched to the edge of the city and released with nothing but his clothes and a bag of barley. You blink, surprised. The guards lead him away with quiet dignity. The crowd disperses. Still, there's a tension in the air. You notice that no one looks each other directly in the eye. Everyone walks with a straight back and careful steps. It occurs to you that mercy here is not softness. It is structure. It is warning. You are dismissed, but told not to leave the palace grounds. Later, while sweeping the courtyard as part of your daily chores, you find a torn scrap of parchment tucked beneath a stone bench. It's a poem, handwritten in delicate ink. You recognize a few words: river, loss, longing. You slip it into your tunic before anyone sees. That evening, the eunuch returns. He brings you to a different wing, smaller, quieter. A room where older men and women sit at looms, spinning gold thread into fabric that looks too fine for this world. The air smells of sandalwood and iron. You are not there to work. You are there to listen. A woman with cloudy eyes begins to speak. She tells you the story of a prince who gave up his inheritance to live among poets, of a concubine who could recite Persian epics backward, of a blind calligrapher whose lines were straighter than sighted men's. Her voice is soft, worn like river stones. She does not raise it, yet you strain to catch every word. One story stops you cold. It's about a servant, nameless, who carried messages between spies, never knowing what he delivered, only that he had to reach a place by sundown, or risk disappearance. He was the shadow beneath history, she says. No names, just motion. You wonder if she's speaking of someone she knew, or someone she was. Before leaving, she presses a coin into your hand. It is not currency. It's old, smooth, worn flat on one side. Remember, she whispers. Even silence leaves fingerprints. You return to your quarters, unable to sleep. The image of the trial plays behind your eyes, the bowed head, the linen cords, the quiet judgment. You think of justice, not as revenge or fairness, but as ritual, as the thread that keeps the empire's cloth from fraying. Not always kind, not always cruel, but always precise dot. And then you recall the poem in your tunic. You unfold it under moonlight. Its last line reads, "Even the birds whisper when flying near the palace walls." You don't know what it means, but you feel it. By now, your sense of time has softened, blurred like ink in water. Days flow not by clocks, but by rituals, meals, prayers, silences, and sunrises. You wake to the sound of distant drums, slow and steady, like a heartbeat echoing through the stone corridors. Today, you're told, is a day of parade. Not for war, not for festival. For power, you're not given much explanation, only a tunic of deeper red than usual, and told to keep your eyes lowered unless instructed otherwise. The eunuch guiding you wears gold-threaded sandals, a mark of higher rank. He walks swiftly, and you struggle to keep pace without seeming disrespectful. Down marble stairs, through sunlit archways, past tiled mosaics of lions, falcons, and crescent moons until you emerge into the imperial square dot. It is vast, grand, intimidating, lined with minarets and wooden platforms draped in colored silks. The air smells of rose water and sweat. Banners ripple above the crowd, each dyed in a different hue to represent a province or clan. You're positioned behind a group of palace staff, close enough to see, far enough to be invisible. The parade begins not with fanfare, but silence. Then, footsteps, hundreds, boots, sandals, hooves in perfect rhythm. The Janissaries march first elite soldiers in layered armor, their plumed helmets gleaming like teeth under the sun. They carry no flags, only polished weapons held upright, with a reverence bordering on worship. Behind them come the guilds, weavers carrying silk banners, bakers tossing coins into the crowd, calligraphers holding scrolls so long they flutter like streamers. Each trade parades with pride, announcing their place in the empire's beating heart. And then the silence breaks. A cheer rises, not wild, not joyful, but practiced, controlled. That's when you see him, the Sultan, elevated on a litter of carved cedar, draped in saffron and silver. He does not wave. He does not smile. He only watches. His gaze moves like a slow blade. You flinch when it reaches your direction, though you're not sure he sees you at all. Then you notice the others watching him. Nobles, guards, even children. all with expressions of rehearsed awe, a language of glances and posture. You begin to understand this parade is not celebration. It is reminder. A woman beside you leans in, her voice barely a breath. He hasn't spoken in public in 2 years. They say he doesn't need to. His silence rules louder than our noise. She doesn't say anything else. Hours pass. The sun burns overhead. You grow lightheaded from heat and hunger. But no one dares move until the Sultan is gone, until the drums slow, until the last soldier has vanished through the stone gates. Later, back in the servants' quarters, no one speaks. Of the parade. They speak of the horse who stumbled, of the boy who cried too loud in the crowd, of the silk that caught on a nail. They notice the cracks, not the grandeur. You realize that in a place this powerful, perfection is demanded and doubted in equal measure. That night, as you return to your mat, you think of the Sultan's face. Not his wealth, nor his silence, but his eyes. How they searched the crowd not for praise, but for weakness. You remember how people bowed before him like wheat in the wind, and how, for a brief moment, you were part of that wind. Your sleep comes late and light. You dream of marching, not in celebration, but out of obligation, your feet moving to a rhythm you never chose. You wake with the phantom sound of drums still pulsing in your ears. You awaken to a strange stillness, a kind of silence that presses against your ears rather than comforts them. The air feels heavier today, not because of the usual heat, but because of the absence of sound. No early chanting, no servant footsteps echoing down the marble halls. Even the birds seem quieter, as if something unspoken hangs over the palace. You sit up slowly, your joints aching more than usual, and dress without instruction. No eunuch comes. No order is given. You simply feel your way forward into a morning that refuses to unfold. Eventually, you're called not by name, but by gesture. A man you haven't seen before motions you forward with a hand wrapped in rings. His voice is low, unfamiliar, yet polished like river stone. He tells you that someone of importance has died, though he doesn't say who. You're to assist with the purification process. No questions. Just follow. The room they take you to smells of incense and beeswax. Heavy drapes block out the sunlight, and everything is cast in golden candlelight. On a raised wooden platform lies the body of a man, his face obscured by a thin white cloth. The attendants around him work in quiet reverence, washing each limb with warmed water steeped in fragrant herbs. You're handed a cloth and motion toward the feet. You kneel, hands trembling, unsure whether you're more afraid of touching death or doing it wrong. The skin beneath the cloth is cold and firm. You try not to breathe through your nose, but the scent of vetiver and myrrh still finds its way in. One of the older attendants hums a slow melody under his breath, a tune that does not comfort but binds, like thread stitching you into this moment. The man you're helping to cleanse was a scholar, they say a royal advisor. He died suddenly. No illness, no wound. Just silence, and then gone. After the ritual washing, the body is wrapped in layers of linen, each fold pressed with oils and prayers. The cloth is soft, but the task is not. Your fingers are raw by the end, the skin pale from moisture, your shoulders stiff from bowing for so long. When it's done, there are no words of thanks, only nods, and then you are dismissed, left to wander the palace with hands that still smell of death. Outside, clouds roll across the sky in slow procession, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow across the garden paths. You sit on a stone bench near a dry fountain, unsure of what to feel. Death is not new to this place, but the way it is handled. Care, the distance, the refusal to grieve, aloud feels both respectful and cold. A passing servant notices your empty stare and offers you a small fig. You take it wordlessly, chewing slowly, pasting every grainy seed as if it might hold a secret. In the afternoon, you're called to assist in a room you've never entered before. The walls are lined with scrolls, each one tied with colored ribbons and marked with symbols you cannot decipher. An elderly man with ink-stained hands instructs you to clean the floor, but not to touch the shelves. As you sweep, you listen to the rustling of paper, the scratching of quills, the low muttering of men translating ancient texts. You're told this is the court archive. The memory of the empire dotted occurs to you, that no one here lives only in the present. Every action is part of a cycle recorded, repeated, remembered. Even the dead are documented, their names tucked between accounts of trade, law, and omens. You spot a small symbol drawn beside one scroll, a stylized eye, open wide. When you ask about it, the old man simply says, "Some stories are meant to be read with caution." That night, after your final tasks are done, you find yourself back near the room where the body had lain. It's empty now, the platform scrubbed clean, the candles gone. Only the smell remains faint, but clinging. You sit on the floor, you're back against the cold wall, and allow your thoughts to unravel in the dim corridor. You wonder how long the advisor had served, how many sultans he had whispered to, how many secrets were buried with him. You realize you'll never know. That's how things are here. Some knowledge is only shared through silence. As your eyes close, the scent of myrrh still lingers in your nose. It mixes with the dust, the ink, the smoke, and becomes something else entirely, a memory perhaps, or the beginning of a dream. Morning returns not with light, but with footsteps. Soft, deliberate, nearly in sync with your pulse. You open your eyes and find the same eunuch who summoned you your first week standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the pale glow of a cloudy dawn. He says nothing, only nods, and you know better than to speak. You rise, bones stiff, and follow him barefoot down the corridor, past chambers you've never entered and tapestries too faded to interpret. Today, you are not heading to the kitchens or the courtyard or the prayer room. Today, you're led to the upper terrace, a place reserved for whispers and decisions. The wind here feels different, less forgiving. From this height, the city looks fragile. The domes and minarets below appear like toy miniatures. Smoke trails from chimneys. Tiny dots move along the market road. You can almost forget the weight of what this place holds. A robed figure waits there, seated beneath a wooden awning. His back is to you. You can see only the curve of his shoulder, the barest glimpse of a golden sash. You suspect who it is, but you say nothing. You're motioned to kneel at a distance, and so you do, heart ticking like a clock too fast for its own good. He speaks not in commands, but in a voice so measured and quiet, it sounds more like thought than speech. He speaks of the empire, of its breadth and brittleness, of how easily it could slip apart like dust through fingers. He speaks of service, not as duty, but as inheritance. He says nothing of you directly, only of those who must see without being seen, hear without responding, and act without leaving traces. When he stops, you realize you've barely breathed. You're dismissed with a wave so small, it's almost imagined. But the meaning is clear. You've been noticed. And now, you carry something heavier than order's expectation. On your way down, you pass a narrow hallway that smells of linden blossom. A servant scurries by, holding a set of polished inkstones. Another carries a covered tray. Life continues as if no terrace meeting ever happened. And maybe that's the point. By mid-morning, you return to work in the archives. The same scrolls, the same dust. But today, you handle them with more reverence. You begin to notice the handwriting styles, the subtle shifts in ink tone, the small symbols that seem to nod to one another across centuries. You find yourself wondering what words of yours might remain, what small gesture or note, or breath might echo after you're gone. In the afternoon, a storm rolls in, not the dry thunder of inland squalls, but a slow, weeping rain. It drips from the eaves in steady rhythm. You fetch buckets to catch the water in the servant quarters, your fingers chilled from the handle, your sleeves soaked through. No one complains. Rain is always a gift, even when it's inconvenient. Later, you're invited to a meal, not the usual staff ration, but a shared table near the garden wall. Grilled lamb, lentils with sumac, and a syrup-drenched pastry that sticks to your fingers. The others speak softly, but the mood is warmer than usual. Someone tells a joke about a pigeon stealing a nobleman's turban. Laughter erupts, brief and precious. For a moment, you feel like part of the world rather than its shadow. That night, just before sleep, you lie on your back and study the ceiling once more. You trace the plaster lines with your eyes, letting them lead you nowhere in particular. The empire hums quietly around you, not as noise, but as presence. Stone, breath, memory, silence. You've learned to live inside those things, and impossibly, to find a kind of peace there. As your thoughts begin to soften and drift, you feel the rhythm of the Ottoman day slowly loosening its grip. The colors that once glared in sunlit courtyards now mute into soft shades of memory. The palace corridors fade into hush. Even the weight of the Sultan's silence lifts, replaced by the gentler hush of distant rain and the faint rustle of leaves outside your chamber. No task remains, no summons calls. Only breath, steady and slow. You let your body sink into the coolness of your mat, arms heavy, fingers still tingling faintly with the scent of ink and old paper. In the distance, a lullaby begins low, wordless, carried on the wind from somewhere. Deeper in the palace, it weaves itself into your thoughts, wrapping around the last flickers of alertness like soft cloth dot. You remember the tamarind water, the smell of roasted lamb, the feeling of scrolls beneath your fingertips. You remember the faces stern, kind, unreadable. And you remember yourself, not as a visitor anymore, but as something quieter, an observer, a thread pulled briefly into the empire's immense tapestry. The story of the empire is not one of thunder or conquest alone. It's in the quiet moments, the unnoticed ones, the lifting of a veil, the brushing of a floor, the passing of a fig from one hand to another. And now that story can rest. Your breath slows, your jaw unclenches, your limbs. Settled. The palace remains, dreaming beside you, stone pressed gently to earth. Sleep well.